Hey everyone, Yoyston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. I've got another fun tier list for you all today, one where we're going to be going through the films, TV shows, and a couple of the major fan films, and ranking them first by how faithful they are to the lore, right? Obviously, great up here being very faithful, and then green down there at the bottom being not faithful really at all to the lore. And then we're going to reset it, and then I'm going to rank them by pretty much my ranking of the films that I like the most and the shows and everything that I like the most to the least. So hopefully this is a fun one for you all, and I want to hear your lists in the comments below. Let me add this really fast. So great is obviously S tier, good is A tier. That's how most of us know these. Okay is B tier, bad. I'm going to put bad as D and then terrible as F. So there we go. Shout out really fast before we start to Zach BDB for creating the initial list, but I have gone through and added a couple of things. So I added these three fan films, Hunt for Gollum, Horn of Gondor, Born of Hope, as well as Rings of Power Season 2 and War of the Rohirrim. So relax, grab a snack, grab something to enjoy as we're going through this. This will probably be one of those longer, less edited videos and more of a conversation for us to kind of go through and enjoy together. So, my friends, thank you all for joining me today. Let's begin our tale. Let's start. So, first off, we're going to be ranking by lore, and then again, I'll go back, reset. We'll go by what I like the most to the least. So, starting first with the animated Hobbit film. This was one of my first interactions, especially with the story of The Hobbit in particular. I remember as a kid growing up in the early 2000s, this film, before getting the Hobbit live action films, but then there was also like this Hobbit board game where you're on your way to the Lonely Mountain and then you have to go against like Smaug and stuff. And then obviously the Hobbit video game that came out in the early 2000s as well. Some of those were kind of my first introductions to the Hobbit story as well, after kind of learning about it from the Lord of the Rings movies and so forth from my dad. And so with this movie, I remember being a little bit scared of Gollum and his design, Thranduil, who kind of looks like Gollum too, or like a version of Gollum, and all of that. From what I can remember from this film, though, it is pretty lore accurate, right? It's pretty good to the lore and how it represents this more childhood kind of story here. And now, to be entirely honest, I haven't seen this adaptation in a rather long time. But what I remember about it was honestly it being closer to the lore than the live action Hobbit movies that we got in the early 2010s. And so for that reason, now, from what I can tell, kind of reading back through it and remembering everything that I saw as a kid, it does omit certain plot points. More of the dwarves die in this movie during the Battle of the Five Armies than they do in the actual book. And so for that, I'm actually going to give this, again, we're talking lore here. I feel like this one deserves an A. I mean, how it does Riddles in the Dark, the Three Trolls, how it does Rivendell and shows Elrond based on Tolkien's description in the book. I actually think it is quite loreful, quite good with that. So yeah, let me know what your thoughts are. Again, I haven't seen this one. It'll be true of the animated movies generally. I have seen them all, or at least most of all of them, but it was rather when I was a kid that I went through, right? They're probably deserving of going back through and rewatching them sometime soon, though. But yeah, that's where I'd put The Hobbit. It really introduced me to the story, and from what I can recall, even though there are obviously changes and everything, there's a lot that is very similar to the book. Definitely not perfect, but there we go. Okay, Rings of Power Season 1. Okay, I don't want this whole video to become a Rings of Power rant, right? I have hundreds of hours, well, maybe hundreds of hours at this point. At least that's what it can feel like. At least 10s or 20s of hours of Royan and I both ranting about Rings of Power and the choices that they make in this show. So if you're more curious about more of my deeper thoughts there you go. And I'm sure there are going to be more videos to follow with this. Now, how does it do concerning the lore itself? So this is in particular, we're talking about Season 1 here. To be honest, I think season 2 was a little closer to the lore in some ways, and then a little further from the lore in other ways than season 1 was. But season 1, it introduced so many elements, like the need for these elven rings of power to stop the elves from diminishing, mithril created by lightning striking like a tree as an elf and a Balrog fought, like all this random crap that I'm like, okay, it's really kind of Tolkien in name only. However, some of the characters that they introduce are true to the lore, at least in some ways, at least according to their names, I guess. Kind of Gil-galad, but again, Royan and I have talked about how he's got the charisma of like a manager at a Wendy's. Kind of parts of Elendil, I think he does kind of a good job. But to be entirely honest, the show deviates so much from the lore that in my mind, it is more the Rings of Power than it is the Lord of the Rings, right? It is definitely not the lore that we know from the Unfinished Tales, from the Silmarillion, from the appendices. And so for that, I'm going to give it a D tier at the bad ranking. I'm not going to go full F, simply because some pockets, some moments, like reminisce the themes and styles of Tolkien. I'm not just going to hate on Rings of Power because it's popular to do so, even though Rings of Power does suck. Don't get me wrong there. But there are pockets. There are small moments where I'm like, okay, that's loreful, right? Even in season 1, there you go. All right, the BBC radio collection. So I listened to a good chunk of this as a kid, before I figured out too that it wasn't actually the audiobook. Again, I was growing up trying to figure out all this Tolkien stuff. But I loved Ian Holmes's performance as Frodo, and it felt so close to, this was before I even had read the books, that I had listened to this. But I remember really enjoying it and making time, like making it a priority to read this dramatization of the lore and of the story. And I think it's really wonderful. Going back through and reading an article about it before I shot this video, apparently Christopher Tolkien even kind of signed off on the scripts before every episode went through, which is amazing. He also provided some audio recordings of how to pronounce some of the names and all of that, which is, again, incredible. And even they cared so much about the lore that with some of Tolkien's later writings that were released after his death, they included some of those moments. So like Wormtongue and the Nazgul during the events of the Fellowship of the Ring, like they included that because that was rather new with the I think it was the publication of the Unfinished Tales. That is awesome. And so I think as far as adaptations go, I actually think this one there are omissions, but again, in every single adaptation you're going to ever get, it's going to be different than the source material. So as far as adaptations go, I actually do think this would probably be an S tier. I need to revisit and re-listen to this. I'm currently listening to a version of the Silmarillion audiobook, and I'm just having a blast with it and how the narrator goes through, and it is the true audiobook. But maybe when I'm wanting to do that with The Lord of the Rings, instead of doing the audiobook itself, maybe I'll seek this out again, because I remember it just being so incredible. Would highly recommend. And again, Ian Holmes, who plays our Bilbo in the movies, plays Frodo in this, and that's pretty sweet. All right, now let's start getting into some of these live-action Peter Jackson movies. So, The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey. I saw this movie more times in theaters with my dad than I think I've seen any other movie, at least in theaters. I swear, we saw it like 8 or 9 times when it came out, and it was awesome. As time has gone on and everything, and looking back, like, you know, I think the Hobbit trilogy at large has gotten some well-deserved kind of criticism, but some of it is not as deserved in my opinion. Definitely not perfect trilogy and everything like that, but I think of the 3 movies, Unexpected Journey is the most loreful of them. I still think it should have just been 2 movies like Peter Jackson had originally wanted, but studio intervention and all that kind of stuff. But I can see that actually a lot of the good ideas and plot lines and stuff like that, kind of setting up the lore, setting up for the Lord of the Rings and trying to connect all of it together, was actually very much in an unexpected journey. So I think, man, B or A. It's in one of these. Okay, if we're actually holding it right next to the animated version, I think the animated version is a little closer to the lore than this version is, so I'll put it in B. Oh man, I'm going to need a C tier. I'm definitely going to need a C tier. Okay. Seeing that Rings of Power is only one row below, I got to go ahead and... Let me edit this here really fast. Okay. It's going to be kind of out of... All right. Color might be a little off, but yeah, we definitely need a C tier. What is less than okay, but better than bad? I'd say all right. C tier. Okay. Somehow okay is better than all right, but we're going to go for it. Okay. Yeah, because it's not next to Rings of Power. It's definitely... And I got to make room for the other Hobbit movies. A little bit of spoiler there. Okay, now let's go to the Return of the King. Actually, I'm going to switch these two around. Let's go animated Lord of the Rings and then animated Return of the King. So these are made by two different creators and so forth. However, they were kind of marketed together in the late 70s, early 80s, and I have seen both of them at least once, I think. I remember being a kid, and I remember being a little bored by the animated Lord of the Rings because I was spoiled by the actual Lord of the Rings that we got, but I wanted a different telling. But I kind of made myself definitely watch through all of this, and I think most of or all of Return of the King, but I've seen a lot of the clips and stuff since. So with these two, I'm going to actually pair them rather together because the Lord of the Rings animated goes from Fellowship of the Ring through the Two Towers, ends after Helm's Deep. The Return of the King more or less picks up kind of after that, with some narration from Gandalf about the Hobbit, the Ring, Frodo getting captured and stuff like that. However, these are not perfect. So I believe Legolas and Gimli are in the Lord of the Rings animated, so the Fellowship Two Towers. And again, they're not meant to be together. Like, this isn't meant to be a sequel to this. This isn't meant to be a prequel to this. But they do more or less kind of tie together, and again, they were only a couple years apart anyway. But I will say, I think the animated Lord of the Rings, to start there, these were some of the first on-screen adaptations of like the Nazgul that we got, which were a little creepy but also a little silly. I think a lot whenever I think about this movie. I think of like the prancing pony scene for some reason because of how they did the animation with kind of mixture live action weird stuff. Is this whole technique. Some of the character designs feel quite right. Some of them feel very off. See Aragorn without much, like, he's got his legs out. He's like wearing shorts the whole time or something like that. Or like a skirt. I don't know. But some of the designs kind of feel kind of true to it. I don't know if I can put it in the same category as like the animated Hobbit, but a lot of it is there. I don't know. See, and so I'm gonna, for now, I think I'll put both of these guys in B, because before filming this video, I also went through, watched some scenes, reminded myself of both of these since it's been so long, and with the Return of the King especially, throughout the years, I've seen that version of the Pelennor Fields and the coming of Aragorn to them and Minas Tirith and all that kind of stuff. And honestly, it's closer to the book than some of the live action stuff. However, for as much we can sing its praises with the lore here, I will say they omit at least the Return of the King omits Gimli and Legolas straight up. They're just not in it. But I think they are in the animated The Lord of the Rings. But then The Lord of the Rings doesn't finish. It just goes from Fellowship to Two Towers and has some things omitted anyway. So, definitely not perfect. I think okay is a good place for them. And it's more that they omit versus straight up change a lot of things, but some of it is certainly changed. Again, when I look at the Hobbit animated film, I don't think of it in the same way, but maybe the Hobbit, maybe it's been too long or I'm too nostalgic. Maybe that also deserves the B tier. But for now, I think this is how we'll leave it for these. Okay, let's get into the gold mine of the Peter Jackson original Lord of the Rings trilogy. Let's start with Fellowship of the Ring. we get amazing backstories, backgrounds on characters, the battles, the lore, all of that kind of stuff. However, certain things are left out, such as the whole kingdom of Arnor. Character motivations are changed, right? Aragorn more denying his destiny than he does in the books, and so forth, right? And so I think it is closer to the story, closer to the lore, than I would even say The Unexpected Journey is. The Unexpected Journey straight up adds things like the whole Angmar subplot and the crypt of the Witch King and all that kind of stuff, which I find interesting, but it's not quite canon. And so I think Fellowship is a bit more loreful. However, we omit Tom Bombadil, we omit the Old Forest, we omit these moments that to the Lord of the Rings could have been very like character developing and these giant moments that were more important in the books. So I think A is actually really good. We're talking about lore again still, so I think A is a good place for that. Let's go to, I'm going to do Two Towers next. Two Towers. So I have thought in the recent couple of years that I think the Two Towers is the most Hollywoodized of the three films. And what do I mean by that? I kind of mean like the romance subplot when Aragorn is just doing his thing in Rohan, how much Arwen and Aragorn are kind of referenced in this romantic sense. The ex machinas, or the moments where like Faramir's kind of a villain, but then he's kind of an ally afterwards, and how they changed characters. To be honest, because of what they did to Faramir in this movie, and because of those Hollywoodized moments, it would have been even more so had they added Arwen at the Battle of Helm's Deep like they were originally planning to. But I actually think the Two Towers is a little less close to the lore than the Fellowship of the Ring is. But for some people, that's okay. I remember when I was watching it with the trilogy with a friend that hadn't seen the movies before. I think we did Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, all in the same day, or no, I think Fellowship one day, and then we came in the next day and it was Two Towers and Return of the King in the same day. But I just remember the energy being very different. Like when Two Towers hit, he's a big fan of film, and if you ever want to see these podcasts, they're on our Patreon, but they were like in 2020. So yeah, my friend, like we sat down and watched these, and then Royan and I interviewed him and some others as well afterwards, just to kind of get that fresh perspective. He liked Two Towers a lot more than Fellowship of the Ring. But again, when we're talking about lore by itself, I think this is pretty accurate. All right, now getting to the Return of the King. I think it does a bit better of a job coming back to the lore, but then you also have the Scouring of the Shire that's missing. You have Sam and Frodo beefing like they don't in the books. You do have a bit of a switched timeline regarding like where Shelob's lair is shown in the Return of the King versus like that technically in the timeline of the Lord of the Rings was happening at the same time as Helm's Deep, or roughly was the same time, something like that. Like the timeline is a little bit off, and they change it in the movies, but Faramir is closer to his character. We've got Denethor. I don't know. It depends on how much weight you're going to put into Scouring of the Shire, the death of Saruman, all of that. I think I'll put it next to Two Towers, as it does, even though I'm putting it in the okay category, the B category, it does a good job at adapting Middle-earth, but with what it leaves out, with the characters it leaves out, with how much it has to kind of change, I will say I think The Fellowship is a slower movie for modern audiences than these two. Less action, more lore, but it's a tad bit closer to the source material than the other two, I think. Again, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. Let me know what your thoughts are with all of that. All right, let's keep going. So The Hobbit, going back to this, The Desolation of Smaug. Sorry, I kind of didn't put all of these in order. Maybe we should have talked about the whole Hobbit trilogy. That's okay. The Desolation of Smaug. So this is where you get Tauriel. This is where you get romance between dwarf and elf. This is where you get Legolas coming in and kind of stealing the show a little bit. So to be entirely honest, it is less than An Unexpected Journey. And it's definitely in the C tier. I do think, however, it adapts it still somewhat close enough to the source material to where, again, it does a better job than Rings of Power, but it does add a lot, make a lot of stuff up, for sure. And not all of it works, which is part of the issue. All right, let's go Battle of the Five Armies. I think this, of the 6 Peter Jackson movies for The Lord of the Rings, this is probably the worst one. We'll get to my personal ranking, so I shouldn't mention that. But it's also, I think, the worst in terms of lore, especially the extended edition. In my mind, the extended edition does not make this movie better, and it probably makes it worse, in fact, because you actually see dwarves and elves kill each other, which has not happened in the actual lore, like, as far as we know from what Tolkien says, since, like, the Elder days, right? They didn't always love each other in the modern days, but they didn't straight up, like, kill each other like they do in the extended edition. They get close in the theatrical edition, and I guess I should clarify at this point, am I talking theatrical or extended? The extended edition generally makes all of these a little closer, but they also, they change some things, so I guess it wouldn't really matter if you're taking it theatrical or extended. They're probably in the same rankings regardless. But it does significantly, in my mind, hurt The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies, because of those elves and dwarves killing each other. I think, lore-wise, it is slightly better because we're at least following the story that Tolkien set out than Rings of Power Season 1. But, like, it still changes a ton, and it's still not, like, quite there. But it is, again, it's still the story Tolkien wrote, at least, generally, more or less, so it's in the alright category. All right, The Rings of Power, Season 2. Again, in some ways better, in some ways worse when it comes to the lore. You have the Battle of Eregion, you have Sauron being a little bit mischievous as Anatar, but then at the same time you have Elrond kiss Galadriel. You have them randomly fight Barrow-wights and come across like this huge giant like ravine in the middle of Eriador that would have like swallowed Weathertop. Like it's ginormous. That with like Isildur finding Ents in Middle Earth and all this weird crap going on. However, I will give it props as a general story for being a tad bit closer to the lore. We get Anatar, we get Celebrimbor, we get the gaslighting, we get Khazad-dûm, and even though it doesn't happen in the Second Age, right? They gave us the, I don't know, I guess the initial awakening of Durin's Bane. Yeah, like we have a bit more Sauron and so forth, even though it is kind of strange and all, again, it's still Rings of Power, it's still all over the place. So but then again, I forgot about the orc babies and the orc families and stuff. Okay, but Numenor also feels a little bit like the downfall of Numenor, a bit more, not perfectly of course. And Elendil's kind of there. It starts to feel a bit more like Lord of the Rings. Oh, this one's tough. Okay, I might get hate for this. I'll put it in C because again, it's more or less starting to follow a little bit more of Tolkien's story, but it's still butchering it. You still have like a lot of random crap in it that doesn't need to be there, but I don't know. It's D or C. It's at the top of D. Again, it's above Season 1 overall as a lore discussion. I'll put it in C. As much as that pains me to put it in the same category as the Hobbit movies. We'll see. We'll leave it there. We'll see if I feel that same way in about 5 minutes. I might move it. All right, War of the Rohirrim. I'm also probably going to get crap for this one. I actually think War of the Rohirrim, does it change some things? Absolutely. Does it add a main character who is not in the lore and everything? Like, totally. Yes. However, man, this is not a great quality picture. That's all right. We'll do it. We'll keep going anyway. Other than that, the story is about right? The story, yes, it adds in this daughter of Helm as having a bigger part, and she kills the main villain instead of her cousin who does it in the lore. But you know what? The invasion of Edoras, the war itself. Yeah, you have these moments where it's anime villain or anime protagonist versus anime villain and some crazy stuff happens, but I will say overall I think it pays a lot of respect to the lore. I think it does a good job there. I I think, yeah, in terms of lore, I'm gonna put it there with a couple other Peter Jackson films. Again, I'm gonna get crap for this in the comments. I totally know that, but despite it adding a whole new character, she's slightly mentioned in the books. We don't know her name, and she doesn't play that big of a role. But yeah, I don't know. Again, if so, it's not as close to the books as obviously the Lord of the Rings movies. Maybe I should have just made more categories. But can I put it in the same as Rings of Power Season 2? It's probably actually, okay, I'm going to put it in the all right C category for lore, because it is kind of where Desolation of Smaug is, I guess, as a story. Again, adds a character, just like Desolation of Smaug with Tauriel and Legolas. Okay, you know what? I think that's more apt. Seeing it next to The Lord of the Rings didn't quite feel right, but it's, you guys see that, for me at least, how I'm ranking the lore and how it goes about telling its story, it's between that B and C for me. All right. Let's talk about fan films, then we'll reset, and I think more quickly I'll go through kind of my personal picks. The Hunt for Gollum, fan film that came out in the late 2000s. This follows Strider finding Gollum, bringing Gollum to Mirkwood. We'll see what Andy Serkis's is like in regards to being similar or different. This one's pretty close. I think we get all the characters that are part of this story. However, there is a Nazgul involved too. But honestly, from what, I've seen this one a few times for sure. I think it's B tier at least. Adds and changes some things, makes it a little bit more dramatic and stuff, but it's right there. I'd say it's up there. Yeah, okay. Horn of Gondor is another fan film. I've only seen it once, and it came out in 2020. It's about 30 minutes long or so, and it follows the Gondorian who called upon the Eothade to come help the Gondorians against the Easterlings, right? And it would inevitably establish Rohan and so forth. Adds drama to it. This guy barely gets there, but again, same sort of thing. Even though it adds to it, I'd maybe even say it's probably closer to the lore. Yeah, I would say about there. Man, I'm starting to rethink some of these. I've probably just spent too long looking at them, but does The Hobbit belong in A or B? I don't know. And maybe it's been not fair because it's been too long since I've seen that one. But I think Horn of Gondor, maybe I could move Hunt for Gollum up here because it's pretty close to it. But I do think it adds some more dramatization to it that maybe isn't necessary and probably wasn't a part of the actual lore. So there we go. All right, Born of Hope. This is my favorite of the fan films for Lord of the Rings lore. And to be entirely honest, it's pretty much all correct, right? For the most part. Again, you have additional characters and so forth. You have extra drama placed on the servants of Sauron trying to find the Ring of Barahir, which I don't necessarily know is very true regarding the actual lore itself. Whether or not he was looking for it at the time of Arathorn being there. But at the same time, it would make sense. There was a reason Aragorn was hidden in Rivendell and raised there, not just for a little bit of time, but for 20 years, or 17 years almost, or whatever it is, versus the other heirs of Isildur who'd only been raised there for a short time. I'm honestly thinking maybe S. Maybe I'm overrating it, but I do think if you want the story of Aragorn as a baby and his father Arathorn and Aragorn's grandfather Eredor, pretty darn close. They even get some of the Elvish in there and some of the forebodings that Aragorn's family has about Arathorn's marriage and Aragorn's fate and what that hope brings and the whole Elvish. Yeah, I think I can put this in S tier, honestly. If it's not S, it's definitely A, but it's up there. It's really up there. And there aren't many changes that they make to the lore as an adaptation. So, yeah, I think that's how I would place the lore, right? Because we're about to go through it, I won't go through and review the whole thing, but there it is. Since we're about to go through it again for my personal ranking. All right, let's do this. Let me go ahead and reset. All right, it reset the whole thing, so I had to set it back up. Okay, editing Yoist in here, and I'm almost done with this video, only to come to find that I switched all right as C and okay as B. Flip those in your mind because I'm not going to re-record another 20 minutes or whatever. But yeah, C is on the bottom, B is on the top. I do not know how I missed that. But yes, as we go on, the one above is better, the one below is not. Oh my gosh. Come on, Yoyston. Okay, we're back for my personal rankings. Again, this will be a lot faster because we've already gone through these. So, as for The Hobbit itself, if I'm going to go watch The Hobbit, I'll be real, I'll watch the live action and stuff. Like, it's just more moving, more grounded and stuff. And it's in some ways, like, fuller telling, even if it's not closer to the lore. I'll put this one in B. Like, I wouldn't mind necessarily watching it again, but it's outdated and animation still kind of freaks me out how some of it's animated. It's just not my personal cup of tea, which is why I haven't seen it recently. But yeah, there we go. Okay, Rings of Power Season 1 is freaking terrible. I'll be so real. I haven't rewatched any of Rings of Power except maybe a couple clips here and there on YouTube since I've watched the episodes for the reviews when they came out. And I don't plan to rewatch it. Like, it's so bad, and also it's so not just like annoying, but offensive to me, to where I'm like, why would I put myself through that? So yeah, little discussion there. Rings of Power Season 1. And you know what? You can be joined by your buddy Rings of Power Season 2. Because honestly, I think I rated Season 2 as like 1 point higher than Season 1, but both sucked. Both were offensive. There we go. Now we're done talking about it. It's in the terrible F tier. Yeah. So again, BBC, I haven't listened to it in a while because I also know parts were omitted. But from what I remember as being a kid and listening, like, these are grand performances. I think this is really quite good. And I'm excited to, at some point, listen to that again. All right, The Hobbit, Unexpected Journey. This is my favorite of the Hobbit movies. This time I'll take the whole Hobbit trilogy together, so I'll find the others. This is my favorite of the Hobbit movies because of the lore, because of the atmosphere, the music, those moments where the dwarves rush in. It's the one that I've seen the most of the three. I personally enjoy it, to be honest. I'd put that in the A tier. Return of the King, again, same sort of thing with the animateds. I'll put them all together. Oh, yeah, I was going to go through The Hobbit. I already forgot. I'll put all the animateds together first, though. Same sort of thing, like some certain cool moments, but it's, 40 or 50 years old at this point, right? We're getting on with that. A little outdated. Some of them are definitely, again, somewhat close to the actual lore, right? And everything like that, which is cool. And so I'll watch some of the scenes, but I really don't have a lot of interest in rewatching the whole thing, at least not right now. So going back to the Hobbit movies, just to finish that up. So Desolation of Smaug, I also think is just all right. Parts of the lore are there. Some performances and everything is really quite memorable, but it's definitely a tier lower. This is where I kind of did notice, like, a reasonable drop-off in the lore quality, and that does affect how I rank things and how much I like things. With Tauriel, with the romance, but there are still beautiful moments, beautiful soundtrack. Also, the dragon fight gets a little wild, but there are moments that really grip me. Yeah, and so I'd still watch it over anything else below it on this list, so I would say it goes there. Battle of Five Armies, same place, but gets, again, even a little bit further away. Some of the fights are good, some of the moments are really clean and all of that kind of stuff. My favorite moment is Bilbo almost revealing the Arkenstone to Thorin and talking about wanting to go back home and plant the acorn and stuff. Like, some of my favorite moments. I actually really like the Thorin-Azog fight, and the eagles flying over, and just how it was shot and the cinematography and the Thorin's death scene. And it really is beautiful at moments, dumb at some others. The White Council versus Dol Guldur and the Nazgul and Sauron is freaking sweet. Yeah, so I would put that there. These two movies, though, I did notice, I was just like, yeah, I think they're a little bit worse than the first Hobbit movie back when they came out, just a bit worse. And so I that's what kind of got me into movie reviews and watching, like, Jeremy Johns and Chris Stuckman and all those guys, so shout out to them on YouTube. But that was kind of what got me into watching movie reviews was these movies. So All right, the GOATs. Let's get it. Fellowship of the Ring, boom, S tier. Two Towers, boom, S tier. Return of the King, boom, S tier. With Return of the King, I'm not really grading them within their spots, but Return of the King is my favorite of the three. It just has the most chilling, amazing moments and inspirational and all this good stuff. But truly, honestly, the music, the ambience, the vibe, the illusion, how it kind of brings you the immersion, the characters, the story, the emotional beats, the fighting, the speeches. It's just, there's a reason that these are considered to be the greatest movies of all time by so many, and I would agree with them, right? I would agree, like, this is the best trilogy of all time. There's not really one movie that takes a major dip in quality. Again, certain moments of certain movies that might, but also it depends on what mood I'm feeling. Like, if I'm really just looking for that atmosphere that you find in Eriador and the Shire and stuff, then the Fellowship of the Ring is such a vibe. But if you're starting to get into the battles and want those Rohan moments and the Three Hunters and Two Towers, if you want the speeches and the wars and everything like that, then the Return of the King. But it really does, like, it changes based on who I watch it with, what I'm feeling at the time. Am I watching theatrical or extended? It's, man, yeah. Sorry, I'm like rocking back and forth in my chair if my audio is just even talking about these movies 25 years later. Straight up, also, they're coming back to theaters soon for their 25 year anniversaries and stuff. So check that out. Earlier this year, I saw the Fellowship of the Ring as performed like alongside a live orchestra, something my dad and I have always wanted to do. So saw that with him and my fiance, and I mean, it was amazing. It was amazing. So it's just so exciting, even 25 years later, even though I've seen these movies dozens and dozens of times. I love them. I love them so much. Yeah, I can't sing their praises enough. Hunt for Gollum. Anything following up the Lord of the Rings trilogy is just, it's unfortunate that I'm not as excited about it, but the Hunt for Gollum, I really enjoy. Obviously, it's a fan film, so the budget's a little lower and everything like that. But I do watch it. I make a point to watch it every once in a while, so I'd put that in the C tier. And it's nothing because of anything they did wrong, but it's a fan film, so there you go. Same with Horn of Gondor. I would put that in the same. Like, I haven't watched it since, but it was a really cool, like, small moment. And honestly, there are so many fan films out there that I haven't seen that I was just looking before I started this video. And they all look awesome. So I have to check more of those out. And so shout out to them. And sorry that they're not on this list. I haven't seen actually quite a few of them on YouTube. But they all look cool, right? I would want to shout those out and check those out because those are great projects. However, Born of Hope, it's my favorite fan film of all time, really. And yeah, I'd put it up here with good A, right? To me, it affects me just as much as like The Hobbit does and all of that. So, all right, then War of the Rohirrim. I'm gonna get crap for this again, but it's my opinion. Whatever. I think I was hyped after I saw it. I need to see it again. I've only seen it still once, but I remember being hyped about Helm Hammerhand and people overcoming their nature. It does slow down definitely a bit in I guess the second or third act, but it is a good film in my opinion. But do I like it more than The Hobbit? Okay, no, I don't. Again, it's when I look at the next tier down. I don't like it more than I like the Hobbit movies. So okay, no, I think C's a good place for it. But maybe I am overhyping it in my mind because I keep putting it higher and then moving it lower. But it is good. It is good. I do think it was not appreciated for what it was. So, that's my personal tier list. We got the Lord of the Rings trilogy up top, followed by Lord of the Rings, the BBC radio version, and The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, and Born of Hope. Then the next two Hobbit movies were The Rohirrim, Hunt for Gollum, Horn of Gondor. And then we got OK with the animateds. Again, I like watching clips from these more than the actual full films themselves, so take that as you will. And then nothing in D tier, and then straight up terrible F. I do think Rings of Power is one of, if not the worst adaptation of Tolkien media that we've gotten on screen. So, unfortunately. So there we are, my friends. I hope to the 5 of you that are probably still watching, I really appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and yeah, what's your tier list looking like? As always, I'll try to link this in the description below so you can make your own. Share it with me. Let me know on X or Discord if you're a patron or a member. Let me know on Facebook. Like, I want to see your guys' rankings of these, so let me know in the comments below, and so on and so forth. If you want to support the channel, please check out the links in the description below. We've got Jordan Rennell's Soundscapes. We got Castle Khan and his Lord of the Rings replicas. A second channel, Masters of Mythology, where I go through, and I'm recently on a Conan the Barbarian, I guess, journey. So that's what I've been doing on that second channel. If you want to check those videos out and help us out there, best way you can support the channel is to either hit that tip button or join our Patreon or YouTube membership, get access to our Discord server and our podcast as well. Thanks so much to our Valar tier patrons, Joby Weasel, Ed Patterson, Comic Nut 64, Zoomi, and Peter Sheppard. I have now been talking for over 40 minutes straight, and my voice is tired, so I'm going to wrap it there, my friends. Thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.